What if being the child of a legend was more of a curse than a blessing? Booker T. Washington rose from the shackles of slavery to change the course of American history. But the story of what happened to his three children, the ones left to carry his monumental legacy, is one of triumph, heartbreak, and quiet rebellion you've likely never heard. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on the untold story of the Washington children. We will uncover the remarkable divergent paths of Portia Washington, the brilliant musical prodigy who graced concert halls but battled private demons and financial ruin. Booker T. Washington, Jr., the namesake who deliberately fled the spotlight only for his family to create one of the most astonishing unions in Black American history. Ernest Davidson Washington, the forgotten son who dedicated his life to protecting his father's empire from behind the scenes, becoming the quiet engine of the Tuskegee machine. To bring you this story, I've spent weeks digging through historical archives, personal letters, and rare newspaper clippings to piece together these forgotten narratives. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a deep dive into the human cost of a great legacy and the incredible resilience it takes to forge your own identity in the shadow of a giant. We're going far beyond the history books today. So stick with me, because the reality of their lives is far more complex and fascinating than you can imagine. Of all the Washington children, Portia seemed destined to shine the brightest. Born on the grounds of Tuskegee in 1883, she was a musical prodigy, an accomplished pianist by age 10 who amazed everyone she met. Her father paraded her talents and ensured she received an education unheard of for a Black woman of her time. But did you know that behind the standing ovations and elite education, her public success hid a private life of financial desperation and heartbreaking marital turmoil? Portia's life began with loss. Her mother, Fanny, passed away when she was just a baby, leaving her to be raised by her powerhouse father and a series of stepmothers. Growing up on the Tuskegee campus was like living in a crucible of Black excellence. She was surrounded by the nation's leading Black thinkers, artists, and activists who came to see her father. Education wasn't just encouraged, it was the air she breathed. Her father saw her prodigious talent in music as a symbol of what their race could achieve. He invested heavily in her, sending her to the best schools in New England. She attended Wellesley College in Massachusetts, and in a truly groundbreaking achievement, became the first Black graduate of the prestigious Bradford Academy in 1905. In an era defined by segregation and limited opportunities, Portia was a living embodiment of her father's philosophy that talent and refinement could break down barriers. In 1907, it seemed like a fairy tale was unfolding. Portia married William Sidney Pittman, a handsome and ambitious Tuskegee graduate who was making a name for himself as one of the nation's first prominent Black architects. Their wedding on Halloween night in the Tuskegee Chapel was a grand affair, a union of two brilliant minds from the world her father had built. It was a perfect match on paper. They moved to Washington, D.C., where Sidney established his practice. They built a home and had 3 children between 1908 and 1912. Portia embraced her role as a mother and wife, but her own ambitions never faded. She made her professional concert debut in 1908, touring with the acclaimed violinist Clarence Cameron White. Audiences were captivated. The daughter of Booker T. Washington was not just a socialite, she was a serious artist. But reality proved far more complicated than the storybook romance. Sidney's architectural contracts began to dry up. Money became a constant, suffocating pressure. Quietly, to keep the family afloat, Portia began giving private piano lessons. This was a source of deep conflict. For Sidney, having his wife Booker T. Washington's daughter no less work to support the family was a blow to his pride. He was also constantly living in the shadow of his famous father-in-law, a weight that strained their marriage. Seeking a fresh start, he moved the family to Dallas, Texas in 1913, hoping to find new opportunities away from the Washington, D.C. elite and his father-in-law's influence. For a time it worked. Sidney designed several significant buildings in Dallas's burgeoning black community. But the struggles continued. In 1915, tragedy struck. Portia received word that her beloved father was dying. But because of their precarious life in Dallas, she couldn't get back to Tuskegee in time to say goodbye. The loss was devastating. Then, just a few years later, in 1918, their Dallas home caught fire and burned to the ground, destroying nearly everything they owned. Hardship seemed to follow her. Yet Portia Washington Pittman was resilient. She channeled the values her father had instilled in her education and service. By the mid-1920s, she had carved out a new, powerful identity for herself in Dallas. In 1925, she became a music teacher at the newly named Booker T. Washington High School. She chaired the education department of the Texas Association of Negro Musicians, shaping music education for black students across the state. Her efforts culminated in a moment of pure triumph. In 1927, at a national teachers' convention, Portia directed a choir of 600 black high school students from her school. Imagine the scene: hundreds of young voices, trained and led by Portia, filling a national convention hall with powerful spirituals. It was the first time a black high school choir had ever been featured at the National Education Association conference. The performance was a sensation, a testament to her skill and dedication. But as her professional life soared, her personal life fractured completely. After years of strain in 1928, at the age of 45, Portia made a bold and courageous decision for the time. She left Sidney Pittman, taking her youngest child and returning home to Tuskegee. She was welcomed back and began teaching music at the institute her father founded. It must have felt like a healing homecoming. But life had another cruel twist. By the late 1930s, Tuskegee was modernizing and now required all faculty to hold formal college degrees. Despite her world-class training and incredible experience, Portia had never completed her BA. On this technicality, in 1939, the founder's daughter was dismissed from the faculty of the school her own father built. But Portia, ever the survivor, simply adapted. She opened a private music studio in her home. And after retiring, she took on her most important role, preserving her father's legacy. She became a relentless advocate. She successfully lobbied for a bust of her father to be placed in NYU's Hall of Fame in 1946. That same year, she stood by as President Truman signed a bill authorizing the minting of the Booker T. Washington commemorative half-dollar coin, putting her father's face in the hands of millions. And her crowning achievement, she was a driving force behind establishing her father's Virginia birthplace, a former slave cabin, as a national monument. Portia's life is a masterclass in resilience. She endured loss, marital strife, financial ruin, and professional disrespect. Yet she continually reinvented herself and ultimately secured her father's place in American memory. She teaches us that a legacy isn't just something you inherit. It's something you actively fight to preserve, even when your own life is falling apart. She passed away in 1978 at the age of 94, having lived through nearly a century of monumental change. While Portia spent her life navigating the glaring spotlight her father cast, her older brother, Booker T. Washington Jr., made a radically different choice to disappear from it almost entirely. But his quiet life would lead to one of the most astonishing symbolic unions in Black American history, a connection that would link two of the most powerful names in the fight for freedom. What does it do to a man to share a name with a giant? For Booker T. Washington Jr., born in 1887, it meant running away from the legacy everyone expected him to embrace. He never sought the stage, never became an educator. But in his search for a quiet, ordinary life, his family would create a headline his father could only have dreamed of. Booker Jr. was only 8 when his mother Olivia passed away. Like his siblings, he grew up under the watchful eye of his father and stepmother on the bustling Tuskegee campus. He was given a quality education, even attending Fisk University for a time, a move that helped strengthen his father's ties to that historic institution. But unlike his sister Portia, who thrived in the spotlight, Booker Jr. shied away from it. The pressure of being the namesake, of having the world watch your every move, expecting a carbon copy of your legendary father, must have been immense. Perhaps as a form of rebellion, or perhaps just a matter of personality, he chose a path of deliberate privacy. He didn't want to be a public figure. He wanted to be his own man. So what did he do? He went into business. By the early 1910s, Booker Jr. had become a real estate broker. In a way, this was a fulfillment of his father's vision, just not the one people expected. His father preached economic self-sufficiency and building wealth through practical skills and ownership. While not as glamorous as running a college, being a real estate agent was a direct path to that economic independence, helping black families acquire property in a segregated America. In late 1913, he married Nettie Blair Hancock, a woman from another accomplished family in Houston, Texas. He seemed drawn to the opportunities in the West and South, away from the political centers where his father's influence was most concentrated. He and Nettie settled down, had children, and built a life that was by all accounts intentionally normal. Their most well-known child was a daughter also named Nettie, born in 1917. Booker Jr. was a devoted father and husband, but he guarded his family's privacy fiercely. While his sister was making headlines, he was quietly closing deals and raising his children. For decades, Booker Jr. lived this quiet life. But the course of his family was about to take an extraordinary historic turn. The setting: Tuskegee, Alabama, the summer of 1941. Booker Jr.'s daughter Nettie, now a college student, was visiting the campus where her father had grown up, spending time with her cousins. One fateful day, she had a chance encounter. She literally bumped into a young physician working at the Tuskegee Veterans Hospital. His name was Dr. Frederick Douglass III. Yes, that Douglass. He was the great-grandson of the legendary abolitionist orator and icon Frederick Douglass. It sounds like something out of a historical novel, but it was real. The granddaughter of Booker T. Washington and the great-grandson of Frederick Douglass met by accident on the very campus Washington had built. A spark was lit, and a whirlwind romance began. By November 1941, they were married. The ceremony was held at the Oaks Booker T. Washington's own home at Tuskegee. Newspapers across the country heralded the event with headlines like, "Two distinguished families united." For Black America, this was more than just a wedding. It was a deeply symbolic moment. It represented a healing of old wounds. Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass had at times been ideological rivals, representing different approaches to Black liberation. Now, through their descendants, their legacies were literally joined as one. The lineage of education and the lineage of abolition were united. Imagine Booker T. Washington Jr. at that wedding. This quiet man who had spent his life avoiding the grand stage was now the father-in-law in a union of historical titans. His daughter's marriage represented the continuity of Black leadership across generations. Booker Jr.'s story shows us that legacy isn't always about grand speeches or public leadership. Sometimes the most powerful legacy is the one you build quietly in the values you instill in your children, who may then go on to make history in ways you never could have predicted. Shortly after the wedding, Nettie and Frederick III had a daughter, adding a new generation to this historic line. Booker Jr. became a grandfather. But his own journey was nearing its end. On February 5, 1945, Booker T. Washington Jr. passed away at the age of 57. He died quietly with little fanfare, having lived just long enough to see his family's incredible chapter in American history unfold. But while Booker J built a life far from Tuskegee, his younger brother Ernest did the exact opposite. He never left. He would become the quiet engine that kept his father's dream alive, the steadfast guardian of the institution, even as his own time was tragically running out. Every great institution has its unsung heroes, the people working tirelessly in the background to make everything possible. At Tuskegee Institute, after the founder's death, one of its most important figures was a man who shared his bloodline, but never sought his fame. This is the story of Ernest Davidson Washington, the son who stayed home to protect the family empire. Born in 1889, Ernest's story also began with the loss of his mother. Olivia A. Davidson Washington died just months after his birth. His middle name, Davidson, was a tribute to her, and the family often called him by that name. Like his siblings, Tuskegee was his playground, his school, and his entire world. The institution wasn't just a place his father worked. It was home. While his sister pursued art and his brother pursued business, Ernest found his niche right there in the administrative heart of the institute. When his father died in 1915, Ernest was only 26. While a new president took over, Ernest remained dedicating himself to the crucial, unglamorous work of keeping the school running. He found his calling in the office of publicity and fundraising. Think about what this meant. Schools like Tuskegee didn't run on tuition alone. They ran on the goodwill and financial support of donors from across the country. Ernest was one of the key people responsible for maintaining that lifeline. He organized campaigns, managed public relations, and ensured that the world continued to see Tuskegee as a thriving, essential institution worthy of support. It was vital work that required diplomacy, organization, and a deep commitment to his father's vision. Ernest also built his family life at the heart of Tuskegee. He married Edith Eugenia Merriweather, a woman from another distinguished family. Her sister was one of the founders of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. As a wedding present, Booker T. Washington had given Ernest a house on campus right across from the college gates. In that house, Ernest and Edith raised their 4 daughters. Imagine that upbringing. Their grandfather wasn't a figure in a history book. He was the man who built the world just outside their front door. They grew up seeing history every day. Ernest would sometimes bring them to his office to help stuff envelopes for fundraising mailers, instilling in them from a young age a sense of duty to the great cause their family had started. By all accounts, he was a devoted father and a respected, steady presence in the community. He wasn't chasing personal glory. He was stewarding his father's creation. Ernest's life is a powerful testament to the idea of stewardship. Not everyone is meant to be the visionary founder. Some are meant to be the dedicated guardians who keep the vision alive. He understood that a great dream doesn't sustain itself. It requires dedicated, often invisible work, day in and day out. His contribution was not in making grand speeches, but in ensuring there was still a place for those speeches to be made. Tragically, Ernest's life was the shortest of the 3 siblings. In the late 1930s, his health began to fail. In September 1938, Ernest Davidson Washington passed away at the age of just 49, leaving behind his wife and 4 young daughters. He was laid to rest in the campus cemetery forever, a part of the institution he had served his entire life. Though he didn't live to see his daughters grow up, they carried his and his father's legacy forward, many pursuing careers in education, quietly influencing the world in their own way. 3 children, 3 vastly different paths. The performer who preserved the memory, the businessman whose daughter united dynasties, and the steward who protected the dream. Their lives show us that there is no single way to carry a legacy. The union of the Washington and Douglass families, born from a chance encounter on the Tuskegee campus, is a story that deserves its own deep dive. On this channel, I've already explored the incredible life of the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass himself, a man whose fiery rhetoric stood in fascinating contrast to Washington's pragmatism. You can watch that video by clicking the link right here. But just like with the Washingtons, the story of what happened to Frederick Douglass's own 5 children is a saga you've likely never heard, one filled with its own unique triumphs, tragedies, and shocking twists. Is that the next untold story you'd want me to uncover? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.